The age-old question, what should I do with my taxes on Shogun 2? Should I leave my taxes on normal, or should I alternate every other turn between very high and normal? Too long didn't watch, those are pretty much the only two possible options no matter what your economic situation is. Well, not possible, but the only two possibly optimal options. It will never be better, even in the very long term, to do low or minimal taxes, and high will only ever be better than other options in the very rare case in which you could leave your taxes on high without making your population unhappy. But very high would make them unhappy. In that very rare case, maybe there's a reason you would pick high, but otherwise you're either choosing between normal and alternating every turn between normal and very high. The reason, of course, you have to alternate is because if you look at the map here, I'm going to piss off a lot of people with this public order penalties by leaving my taxes on very high. So ideally, I would just leave it on very high, but you can't do that practically speaking because your provinces will revolt. So you have to actually alternate so that they're kind of happy again. And you can see even on normal taxes, this province would be unhappy. So I might have to like recruit a unit, exempt it from tax. We can also see that in one turn, the resistance to invaders is just going to go down. So the real question is, what's the difference between normal and alternating between very high and normal? Well, your intuition might be that in the long term, a lower tax rate should be better. And that can be true with normal. And the reason for that is if you take a look at the town growth penalties and bonuses over here, if I'm on normal, my tax level is giving a -2. But if I bump it up to very high, it's giving a -15 to growth. So there's a big jump in growth here, and this is not a static number. So it's not just -13. There's a static number plus a negative modifier that gets applied to all other tax or all other growth benefits. So from the global food surplus and town buildings, then there's a percentage modifier depending on your tax level plus a static number depending on your tax level. So in any case, you're going to be hurting your growth quite a lot by turning the taxes up to very high. And additionally, Owari is a good example of this because it was unhappy last turn. If a province was unhappy the previous turn, you get an additional -25 to growth from it being discontent. So if I'm slamming every other turn on very high, you can see most of my provinces will be unhappy. So overall, I'm actually getting, on normal in this province, it would be -2 from the tax level and very high would be -15. Let's just say this is an average scenario. It probably isn't. But let's just say on average across all, how many provinces do I have? 32 provinces. I'm getting 13 less growth and I'm getting this -25 every other turn. So we could actually divide that by 2 and say it's -17.5 on top of this -13. So overall, I'm getting 30 less growth per turn, and it's draining that growth. However, the thing is that at some point, you will have gotten rid of all of your town wealth. In fact, Owari is an example of this, where even though it's losing 27 growth per turn, it's not going to actually affect the province wealth because there is no town wealth. All we have is farming wealth because we've eliminated all town wealth. So let's check if we can find a province with town wealth. So Mino is a good example here. We're getting -24. You can see much larger number than Owari, and the reason for that is you got the 9 growth from here, the 4 growth from here, and then the -25 from discontent. So pretty much you're gaining no additional growth penalty from the multiplier that gets applied via the tax level. It's only the static number that is mattering here. So I think -13 might be or -15 total might be the static number for very high. And then -2 is the default static number for normal. That sounds about right. In any case, in Mino, there's a much greater penalty that's being applied because we have a positive growth factor, ordinarily before the tax level is applied. So that multiplier, that penalty multiplier is being added on top of the static multiplier. And in this case, it's reducing our growth by an additional 9, which is bad. So it's losing 13 growth. Next season, and actually again, if I was alternating back and forth, that number should be more like 30 growth total because it's it's not 17. Let's see, 25 divided by 2 is 12.5, not 17.5. There we go, math. 12.5, so an additional 12.5 per season on top of the 13 is about 25 growth that we're losing per turn. So currently we have 25 growth in the town, so this will go down one turn, and then the following turn it'll go down again, and now we will have zeroed out our town wealth. So in these couple of provinces, it's not actually hurting us all that bad because at some point these minuses to town growth don't really matter in the long run if you're using this strategy, right? If you're going back and forth between normal and very high. So depending on how close the floor is, this strategy actually gets better, alternating between normal and very high. However, let's take a look at Kyoto. Well, that's not a great example. What's a province that has a lot of town wealth? I haven't played on this save in forever, so I don't know if there are any breadbasket provinces. Kai is a decent example. 691 wealth. Most provinces start with 300. Some special provinces, I think like Satsuma, starts with 600, but almost all of them start with 300 base town wealth. So this one will take quite a while to drain. Let's take a look at Izu. Looks like it has a lot of town wealth. Yeah, 1150. This will take quite a while to drain. So this will hurt us, very much so in the long run. So if we're draining actually 25 per turn, let's just imagine overall, then, over the course of several turns or several years, then this could completely eliminate the town wealth. And now we're no longer getting, 2,646 income from this. We're getting, minus 1150, the tax rate, all that stuff. The province wealth is dropping down to 4,000 eventually instead of 5,600, which will take a while to get there. So the question then becomes what is the crossover point? How long into the future do I need to project in order to actually be earning money overall by leaving my tax on normal, so that provinces like Mino can actually be gaining growth, and even Owari's still losing, but only because they were unhappy last turn. And then provinces like Izu are gaining massive amounts of growth per turn. So how long would I need to project into the future? The answer is it sort of depends, but in the vast majority of situations, it's not a good idea. The rare situation is if you're focusing on a breadbasket strategy and you also utilize a strategy that involves turtling up at some point in the campaign. Most players will turtle up right before Realm Divide. Some players may also turtle up at one point at least prior to that. For example, if you're playing the Shimazu, once you take the island of Kyushu here, then people typically tend to turtle up with only one, warring front over here, or maybe no warring front at all. Same thing with the island of Shikoku, or if you're playing the Date, then maybe you have a turtle up place once you reach kind of here and you only have two warring fronts. Kind of turtle up, make a better army, all that kind of stuff. If you're going to turtle up for a few turns, like several turns, like let's say like 20 to 40 turns, which is not unreasonable, then what you can do is eliminate a lot of your dead weight armies so that you're not spending all that upkeep cost, and focus on breadbasket strategy, leave your taxes at normal, and just really pump up your town wealth. Overall, that will tend to pay off, but again, it depends on a lot of economic factors. So the short answer is the actual optimal is slamming between very high and normal in the vast majority of situations, unless you're playing on a breadbasket strategy and you're basically turtling up in that situation. The long answer is that there are a lot of other economic factors. So let's take a look at what those are. So enter spreadsheets. This is my spreadsheet that I made. It has a lot of values. It's basically modeling every single economic factor, with the only fuzziness is that the variables here, just for simplicity, are not for every single province, because these types of variables will be different for every province, or like what level of farm you have. But instead, I'm doing it for the average province. So, that's the only level of fuzziness, but everything else here is modeled exactly as it should be. And what we're looking at here is when this red line, the very high alternating strategy, dips below the gray line, which is the normal tax strategy. In this chart, we're looking at per turn income, just straight up how much money am I earning per turn. This chart is maybe more important depending on why you care, which is the cumulative income you've earned overall, because this takes a lot longer for the normal strategy to win out than just the per turn income, right? Because at some point you're earning more money per turn on the normal strategy, but you will have earned so much more money over normal on the very high that it takes a long time for the cumulative to win out. So if you kind of you eyeball where these cross over, this is about turn 31 in this particular economic situation, and this is about turn 60 something, right? To make it a little bit easier to tell, I've made this table here. If it says NA, then that means that strategy never wins out. Otherwise, here's the income win per turn, which is this graph, and then here's the cumulative income win turn. So we want these numbers. We care about what these numbers are. So the important values here that are going to matter most is growth, first of all, and second is any other static wealth factor, like meaning that doesn't change over time, essentially. So like how much money is the farms giving you, what's the base wealth in each of those provinces, etc. The number of provinces doesn't matter too much. I added it for completeness, and so that you can get these total values, which are maybe more useful if you care about like the actual total number of koku for some reason. It does influence the administrative cost here. Of course, the number of provinces you have, which is modeled here. I have the actual administrative cost formula here, which took some doing. But in any case, that ends up not mattering too much. It's just a multiplier on the number of wealth. It doesn't matter in terms of which tax strategy you should use. So the basic takeaway is that the higher your growth, then the better the normal strategy becomes, which maybe makes intuitive sense. However, the higher your base wealth value, if for whatever reason, like here's additional non-farm, non-town wealth, so like markets, let's say you have a market in each province, that's where this 300 is. But let's say you have an upgraded market, I don't know what that is, but let's just pretend it's 600. Then the normal strategy gets a little bit worse, and it takes a while for it to catch up because the higher tax rate you're getting on very high of 50% instead of the normal's 30% is just giving you that much more wealth due to this static number, right? So again, if you like upgrade farms to all land consolidation, then you can see the normal strategy gets a bit worse because you're making more money overall. So that's the basic intuition here. And then depending on your economic situation, you can see how many turns would it take for me to be earning more money per turn or for cumulatively for me to have earned more money. So it says 31 here is the income win turn, but like let's say you were going to turtle up for 30 turns or so. I still think it would be worthwhile to set your taxes down to normal in this particular economic situation, which is fairly conservative. 15 growth is like definitely not nothing, but it's not as insane as you can get it either. So yeah, I mean, you'd probably have better farms in that case, but where you're getting 15 growth. But in any case, so the short answer is, again, that almost always it's optimal to alternate between very high and normal every other turn. But the truth is that it's not that big of a difference. So like, check this out. This is the winning income, turn 50, tax rate per turn, cumulative, blah, blah, blah. So let's just take a look at the per turn amount, 9,058. And if I were to cumulative winning per turn. Wait, let me check this per turn rate. So this is the difference, I think, between, is this right? Yeah. This is the difference between normal and very high on that turn. So I mean, earning 9,000 versus 8,000 koku. So let's change the economic situation again. And here I'm earning 12,000 versus 10,000. So I mean, 2,000 is not nothing, but like, you know, it's a very slight difference overall. Cumulative wealth here, very high is about 1 million, and this is 1.25 million by turn 100. So you are earning like 25% more if you left it on normal in this case, but you know, it's projecting it out to turn 100. There's other factors as well. Like for example, a lot of people say, and I agree with them, that money now is better than money later. And that's generally true, because if like that money helps you to take more provinces and those provinces give you additional wealth, then like, there you go, right? Like you can field more units. On the other hand, another important thing is that you really care about the number of units that you can upkeep. And when you're looking at like this kind of big of a difference here, that 2,000 koku per turn translates into, you know, half an army of Ashigaru or so. Is that right? Did I do that math right? Something like that. So that's not nothing, you know, by turn 50, or for 50 turns into the future, to say I can field half as many additional units. So I don't know. I think that it is interesting to think about playing on normal. And the real truth is, like, if you're not worried about and you don't want to do the micro slamming between very high and normal and having to manage the happiness in each province, I would just leave it on normal and call it good. But here's the segue. I dislike the fact that that high, low, and minimal are never viable options. So I have made a mod that I'm going to link down in the description below that seeks to adjust these tax rates to make this more strategically interesting. And I'm going to do another video that goes in depth into how I designed this mod and how the actual tax rates work, so that you can kind of develop an intuition for it. And you don't have to like play with spreadsheets, but you can kind of get an idea of like, okay, what does this decision mean? And the truth is that it'll work more like you imagined it should have in vanilla, whereas the low tax rate is better in the much longer term and the higher tax rates are better in the shorter term. So that's the short of it. And then, of course, growth and static wealth works like you imagine it will. But I spent a lot of time modeling this. I went through many different iterations of what are the different tax rates and what kind of effects might they have in different economic situations to develop what I think is maybe the best way that I can change it without like heavily modifying the base game code. So just playing with the variables that are available to us. So yeah, check out the mod if you want to play a more interesting economic game. And I'm going to post a video more in depth about like how that mod actually works and how I came up with the numbers that I did. Thanks for watching. Happy taxing. Goodbye.